Welcome, and thank you for joining IFAJ today for the presentation of the Agrievolution Alliance on worldwide trends in agriculture machinery and the effects of COVID-19. This webinar is the latest professional development event organized by IFAJ to provide agricultural journalists and communicators with access to information essential to keeping their agriculture audiences up to date. The Agrievolution Alliance is the global voice of agriculture equipment manufacturers that represents over 6,000 companies around the world. IFAJ partnered with the Alliance last year to facilitate participation of agriculture journalists and communicators in the Agrievolution Summit held in Spain. Today, Charlie O'Brien, Secretary General of the Agrievolution Alliance, will present the results of the most recent surveys of Alliance members related to agriculture machinery, manufacturing, sales, and usage. Welcome, Charlie. The podium is yours.
Thank you very much, Lena. And if I can, I'll also be joined by Ignacio Roots, who is the chairman of Agrievolution Alliance. So he will talk specifically on the results and impact of COVID on the agricultural equipment sector. And then I'm going to talk in general about the market as well. So he'll join us in the second part. Now, if I can see if I can share my screen here.
I've made you the host, Charlie.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Can you see it yet?
No.
So I'm just clicking on the bottom under where it says share screen.
Yep, and then your screen should show up, and if you click on the PowerPoint, select the PowerPoint.
Yep.
And then down at the bottom right, it will say share.
Well,
Do you see the when you click on share screen, do you see the PowerPoint? There we go.
you got it?
We got it. Yep.
Okay. Still have it? Okay. So anyway, just quickly in terms of what we'll talk about today, just very briefly, a little reminder of who we are as Agrievolution. And then I also want to, as we go through this, we'll share with you information that's offered and available to IFAJ members. And we appreciate the opportunity today to spend this time with you. But there is information, a lot of additional information that would be available to you on our website. So we'll point some of that out as we go ahead with the presentation. And then we'll talk about current trends and impact on the sector overall, and then talk about specifically the COVID-19 impact on our sector. So just as a reminder, and Lena talked about this, we represent 15 organizations worldwide, North and South America. It's England, Spain, France, Germany, Italy, SEMA, the European Union Representative Association, Russia, Turkey, Iran, India, China, North Korea, and Japan. So covering a great deal of the world with these associations. And again, as Lena mentioned, really representing 6,000 agricultural equipment manufacturers across the globe. So we've got a pretty good reach overall in terms of you know, member participation within the Alliance. I'm going to start with, you know, one of our services, again, that you would have some visibility to some of the information on this. We do have a statistics program that talks about shipments of, overall shipments of equipment. There's 4 different programs: tractors, combine, forage harvesters, and balers, and we're considering some new programs for that. And I'll just give you a taste of what's out there and what could be available to you. So you'll see a statistics program. This is specifically for the tractor program. And in the top graph, you'll see information on 12-month moving average. And you'll notice that the worldwide tractor market reached kind of a high here in Q2 of 2018. And then we started to see some tapering off overall. Again, this is just the tractor market, as the demand for the replacement, you know, began to decline a little bit overall. Then when we look at the, look at the bottom of the chart here. Let's see if I can make it a little bigger. Whoops, shouldn't have done that. Anyway, if you look at the bottom of the chart, you'll see that you'll start to see that tapering off. And these are general market conditions overall. After coming off a high period in 2017 and 2018, you start to see, you know, some of the replacement being completed and the market, you know, kind of a general decline. So you see it go down in June of 2019, down 15%, and then you see it in September 2019, 6.1, going down again December 2019, 7.3, and March of 2020 down 9.5. These are, you know, kind of what we'd, you know, general normal cycles, I guess what I consider normal cycles from the ag equipment business. Obviously a very cyclical business. And then you see the impact overall of COVID starting to take place here as we start to look at the May 2020 results that are coming through overall, again, just for the tractor market. But again, this sort of index information is available to you as you look at the Agrievolution website. The other thing we work on is industry issues. So we do have a specific committee that works on this that Ansamat Ignacio is responsible for. And as a world organization, Agrievolution has an opportunity to interface with many of these other world organizations in the agricultural sector, whether it's FAO, part of the United Nations, where they're looking for, you know, data overall and see how they can, you know, find different data that we may be able to help them with. The World Bank, who's looking to get into some other areas of the world and provide assistance specifically around Africa. And so we do have an opportunity to work with other organizations, and certainly now with IFAJ in terms of communications overall. So we, again, appreciate that relationship and partnership that we have with you. Part of our mission overall as an organization is advocacy, and we want to make sure that we are doing our part in educating the leaders around the globe in terms of what we do as the ag sector, ag equipment sector. And so we promote, and as we talk to ministries of ag, and here in the United States, talk to the Department of Agriculture. So again, promoting what we can do overall from a sustainability perspective and the health of agriculture as a whole, and making sure it's sustainable and we're providing food for the people around the world overall on an ongoing basis. We also have summits that was talked about before. Owen had represented IFAJ officially represented IFAJ at the last summit that we had in Madrid and Valencia, where we talked specifically about specialty crops. So as our summits rotate around the world, we concentrate on those regions of the world and try to bring to life a little bit of the agricultural environment that's going on in that part of the world, as well as discussions of issues overall that are happening worldwide that impact us as people that participate in agriculture. So we talk about those issues at those summits. The next one will be held in 2022 in Moscow, and certainly extend a sincere invitation to everyone to attend that summit. Talking about production now, these are some of the trends overall with what's happening with the ag equipment market right now. These are surveys that go out to members that we have overall. And these are the results that we have of the membership that each one of those associations have. This is an index that talks about the business climate overall. And you can see what's transpired here. We've got current situation and future expectations. And there should be another data point that says October of 2019. But overall, you can see that we started to see the decline overall we're seeing in the previous graph. And then all of a sudden, you know, the current situation and expectations of the business climate is very negative at this point in time. This is not a percent, it's just a kind of a measure of an index of what the expectation is, what the current environment is. So people are saying it's very negative, and the future expectations, you know, we haven't seen it start to turn around yet. So the graphs are still pointing down in terms of the future expectations as well. To get a little more detail and a little more granular on that, you can see the different regions that have responded to that. You see the United States all of a sudden has gone very negative in the last survey. The black bar indicates the most recent survey in May of 2020. You see Western Europe again going very negative, China going very negative. You see Turkey with the May of 2020 where you see an uptick. And you saw in 2017, 2018, Turkey, you know, certainly had other issues domestically that were going on, and all of a sudden now we're seeing some more positive things that are happening in Turkey overall. China and Japan, again, very negative overall in terms of the business climate. So you start to see the regions of the world and what's happening overall. Production, and you start to see some of the questions here. We consider our business, our current business to be, and this is again answers from manufacturers themselves. So the way I personally look at this particular graph, I probably look at the black and the gray, and I combine the information there. It's because they're unfavorable or very unfavorable, both negative at this point in time. So you look at Japan, you'll see, you know, 92% are negative responses overall. Russia, not as negative, certainly a lot of basically satisfied. Turkey, positive again. Western Europe, you see negativity. United States, 72% negative responses, and you combine everything. Here's what the world picture looks like, with 63% with negative responses overall in terms of the business climate. You see that as, again, turnover. So this is talking about turnover in the next 6 months and what the expectations are. Again, these are survey results, so we're just talking about expectations now. But again, you see what is decreasing, remaining unchanged, or growing. You see Turkey is the unique region or country that we're seeing right now where they are expecting some growth or remaining the same based on their manufacturers responding to the survey. Most of the other areas of the world are seeing a decrease, and Japan certainly seeing a decrease, and Western Europe seeing a decrease. And you see the wrap up here of the world overall when you combine the data overall. 61% are seeing and expecting within the next 6 months a decrease from previous levels. Market environment. So this chart switches to the farmers themselves and what the manufacturers are feeling that the farmers are, what their expectation is overall, and profitability of farming. So the orangish bars are negative, obviously. Then we've got neutral and gray and positive. So you see Russia is showing some positive, you know, certainly some positive, with more than half the responses being positive. Turkey, very negative from a farmer perspective again. The expectation of what the perception is of farmers. Western Europe, you can see pretty much split there. United States, farmers and customers from relative to profitability, you know, seeing some basically negative in the world, negative, but still a lot of neutral overall. And then we're going to get into specifically, we've been doing a survey since the impact of the virus pandemic came out. So we started this probably in early April, maybe even March. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ignacio to go through the information relative to the impact on our sector overall with COVID-19. So I'll see if I can turn this over to him. You, I may need your assistance again.
Hi, Charlie, or maybe you can continue with your presentation. I find no problem. I think it would be easier.
Oh, okay, you just tell me when to move it forward.
Okay, so thank you very much, Charlie, and thank you all for joining us for this webinar. And now it's the turn of trying to explain the results of the COVID-19 impact survey that we are still in sending to our members in order to know the situation around the world and to trying to set the differences among countries and among regions, because we are presenting now the summary of the results, but as you will know, or you will receive the presentation, you will see the differences among countries. So again, I want to set this first information that you will be receiving the presentation. I will not be covering all the information that is included in the slides, and you will receive also the reports when you will have further information. So with this presentation, we want to summarize the situation and trying to explain what happened in the past since the first shock in March, in order to set the differences around the world with our sectors, because we now know, we are aware that we are evolving in two different situations. So, sorry. So to trying to understand the slides, I want to set that we have divided the situation since March in 4 different stages. We call the first shock in March. Then we have some kind of a intervention period during April, where all the associations around the world manage the situation with the public sector, with the governments, in order to get the machinery sector to be considered as an essential business sector and to provide services and equipment to our farmers, because we needed agriculture to continue working. We needed our farmers to continue to produce food and other agricultural products. And we, as a input supplier, we need also to be considered as this essential sector. So for us, the month of April was the intervention period. Then we have a third stage in May, when we started to show some kind of a recovery in the markets, especially for the production, for the manufacturers. And then a fourth period during the summer, starting in June, where we have some kind of a stabilization of the situation around the world. For the slides, please pay attention that we have decided to name the different periods as weeks, because we started the survey on a weekly basis. But when we reach June, and when we reach a stabilization period, we change the periodicity of the survey to a more 3 weeks or maybe a month basis. So though we continue to name it last weeks, for you to understand, week number 7 is the month of May, week 8 is June, and week 9 is July. So though we are now expecting to run the latest survey in August, these 3 weeks are May, June, and July. So the first question that you find in your screens is the perception of the companies regarding the financial outlook for business. And here I can summarize that it's difficult to observe a getting worse reply over time, and the situation has been improving over time too. But, and this is the very first time that I'm going to name it trying to make an assessment of the situation around the world. I told you that we have a first shock in March, but some countries have been suffering or have a different trend on this situation, because they started to suffer as the first shock mainly in May rather than in March. So we have 2 different trends, one specifically for namely the countries in the European Union, when we suffered the first shock in March, and then some countries, mainly far away from Europe started to suffer the first shock of the crisis in the latest April, or starting in May. So when we have disaggregated data, it's difficult to see the differences. But when you see the answers from the different countries around the world, you will see that they have different answers delayed in time. So countries that have this delayed shock in May are not as positive as the rest, as long as regards to the week 9 in the replies. You can see here, we have in the presentation a first slide for the trend of the situation, and the second where you can find the answers, the precise answers for the different countries. So this was for the question number 1. For question number 2, please, Charlie, we have this interesting question about international travel for people. If we've been suffering bans for international travel over time. And there are differences to consider as long as international travel is concerned, since within the European Union, there are no internal borders. So for our countries, in Spain, France, Italy, Germany, we have no bans for international travels as regards to internal borders in the European Union. The situation is different for the external borders. That is the same for other countries in the Agrievolution Alliance, that they have been suffering for this international travel bans, mainly in the latest months, especially for those who suffer this delayed shock. And here you have which countries are suffering for these bans, especially China, USA, South Korea, and India. And the countries, especially in the European Union, where we don't have these bans, or we have some type of, or the ban is related to some extent, since we have no problems within European Union, but we have problems to travel outside the European Union. The third question, please, Charlie. Here you can find here in the 2 next slides a number of headlines for your publications, but the situation is common among Agrievolution members as relative which are the problems that we have been collecting among our members, because we have a number of members of the Agrievolution Alliance, which are associations, but each association is collecting information from their companies, especially for manufacturers. So here you have the answers that we have collecting in these 2 last months. But the summary is, you can find how the crisis is affecting the investment behavior of the farmers and how the supply is affected by international trade flows around the world. In those regions where borders are open to transport of goods, the manufacturing recovered more easily during time. And regions which are relying on exports are more affected, especially is the answers that we are receiving from China. We know that these are very important manufacturing and exporting country, and their main concern is as regards to exports. So those countries which are mainly focusing on exportations of machinery, they are suffering, or they are more affected about this lack of transport of goods worldwide. And especially the threat of a second heat scenario is constraining companies' budgets, and the situation may be worsened in the next months, mainly in the midterm for the companies.
Yes, Ignacio, if I could, if I had to summarize, all the comments that are coming in, this is an open-ended question that people can respond to. If I had to summarize and say what are the main themes that we saw coming through, I'd say one of the things, there's a concern that there may be a second wave, which Ignacio was referring to. Also, from a second point, they won't be able to, if there is a second wave, won't be able to resume normal economic activity, and that may or may not even be with the second wave. But there's concern about when is the return to normalcy. The third one is the supply chain issues and restrictions on normal events that may facilitate commerce, whatever that may be. So, supply chains is being impacted, still continues to be impacted, and restrictions on, just normal ways to conduct commerce. And then the other thing is that there's short and long-term impacts will be negative overall. So I think those are the 4 points that just if you look for trends overall in some of the responses, those are kind of the 4 points that I also glean out of the responses that from the survey results that we're getting.
Again, thank you for your comment. The next 2 questions are more or less the same, and they relate to the support that we are receiving from the governments, both for financial and administrative, or the lack of administrative burden, as you can decide how to look at it. But both questions are more or less related. And you have to consider that we are associations. Our main task is to have these conversations and try to convince the governments on how to deal with the problems that our manufacturers, their companies are facing. So we need this support for the governments, and we have managed to get this support from the very beginning. That's what I told you, that for us, the second stage in April was this intervention period where we, all the associations, managed to achieve that our sectors were considered as essential. So regardless of this administrative support, a number of countries have been reporting also that they have received financial support during this crisis. And you can see in the slides an increase in financial support over time, whilst administrative aid has been reduced. Though this evolution is kind of misleading, since the countries reporting have changed over time. So as you can see, the difference have changed from 7 to 5 or 6 to 5, but those changes are based on the reporting countries, because they have changed from one survey to the other. But the main result of these questions, the conclusion that we have for these questions, is that support from national government is the key for success, regardless of regional policies, especially, for example, in the European Union, when we have this common agriculture policy and these common policies for our business, for the sectors. But in this crisis, the national governments have had a key role in order to overcome the negative consequences of the crisis. So being considered as an essential sector has been really important for the continuity of the service for farmers. And this has been a really good action from the members of the Agrievolution. So please, if you go to the next here we have a really interesting slide showing these 2 different trends for the different regions around the world as regards to the closed facilities of our members during the pandemic. Here you can see how we have like 2 different peaks in the activity, and we have from week 1, we consider mainly the countries in Europe, and then the week 5 when we added not also the situation in Europe, but in other regions around the world. So we have like a decrease or the other approach, an increase in the number of open facilities over time. And then all of a sudden, in week 5, we sum up a new number of companies that we found it closed. So we have a first shock, a second shock, and after that, when we reach the week 7, all around the world, all the companies decided to open, or the situation in the market was good enough in order to increase again the production and the service for farmers. And here again, you find in the latest survey which countries have all open facilities or almost open, and we have only South Korea with a number ranging from 20 to 40% that the facilities were closed. But the situation is getting better over time.
And just to magnify that, I just want to point out that this question deals specifically with manufacturing facilities. Mm-hmm. Because you'll see another question talks about supply chain, but this question is specifically around the manufacturing facilities themselves. And back to you.
Again, as Charlie was saying, now we have the same or more or less the same situation, but as all regarding all the supply chain with for the suppliers of parts and components for the manufacturers and the dealers and so on. And again, we can observe the three stages, though the trend is more or less is more easy to find. The first shock, we have the shutdown factories and difficulties in supply and orders. Then we have the next stage, the stabilization, with the word some disruption is common around the world, and the companies decide whether to recover activity or not. Because again, though our companies have been discussing and analyzing how to ensure the safety of their employees and the safety of their customers, even from February, March this year, the situation has reached a so complicated level during time that the companies have had to decide whether if they wanted to continue the activity or not. So we can see here how some reduction is more or less is common, but we have some companies that decided not to continue activity till the situation normalizes. And during summer, we found an increase in the no disruption, while summer harvest encourages the demand of services and equipment from our customers. The next, what is the economic impact of new orders being taken off for agricultural equipment whole goods? Or, as a summary, what is the situation as regards to our customers and if they want to invest in new equipment or not? So here we have that while the V-shaped crisis is turning into a U-shaped crisis, the medium and long-term forecasts throw a negative impact for the businesses. Oops, sorry for that. That was sorry for that. I was reading the different slide. Here we have that the question reflects perfectly the difference between the supply and demand. Though the situation is recovering, the level of investment is not the same as it was before March 2020. The farmers are worried about the COVID and its consequences, even though agriculture is one of the sectors with a better image among consumers during this crisis. And though food consumption has increased at home and on our homes, the expenditure of agricultural products has decreased, especially in some kind of agricultural products considered as luxury goods, like we usually name as a specialty crops. And those farmers that were sustained in the new machinery markets in a number of countries worldwide have reduced their investments. So we have that the situation for the new orders is worse than the situation that we have for the current situation in the market. So we now are facing a very delicate situation for the near future, for the midterm situation, and we'll see what happens. And in the next slide, we have that those countries that are or that have a higher percentages of specialty crops, as I was mentioning, like Brazil, Italy, Spain, USA, China, those crises are facing a reduction of the new orders that is higher than in the rest of the countries that we've been asking among the alliance. And here is the slide that I was mentioning before. This is regarding the employment in our companies, and this we are seeing worsening in the situation for as regards to the employment, but it's mainly for the temporary workers. And I was just saying before, we were expecting, or when the pandemic started, we were talking about a V-shaped crisis with a very high or very steep decrease in the market, followed by a very steep increase in the market. But now that we are suffering for this delay and we are now facing this potential second wave of the pandemic, now this V-shaped crisis is turning into a U-shaped crisis. And now our companies are facing the negative truth that it's saying that the situation is not going to recover as quick as we thought. And now the situation as regards to employment is getting worse. And as I told you, it usually happens in the machinery sector when we are facing a crisis. The unemployment suffers for the temporary workers. So now we have this increase in the unemployment in the current for the current situation, and maybe we will worsen in the next months. And the last question is based mainly for the transport of parts and equipment due to the closing of borders. And here we see the different situation or how we have suffered, we have been observing an improvement in the situation as regards to the transport of goods, but this situation is different in different regions of the world, in the European Union, or in those countries which are based on road traffic transport. The situation is getting better than in those countries which trade flows are based in harbors and other types of transport rather than the trucks and other road transport or trains. So the situation is worse in Brazil, Japan, South Korea, and United States rather than in the rest of the world, especially in the European Union, where the situation for the borders is better. So the situation for the transport of parts is not something to consider as regard to the situation of the market. So this was the summary of the 10 questions that we are launching to our members. We are planning to send new sets of questions to our members. And of course, we will be sending the results and the report of those results to all of the members of the IFAJ, and we can answer to your questions. And we are thank you. We're going to express our gratitude for you joining us today. Thank you very much.
So Hugh, back to you. I guess I would just echo my thanks as well, and just a reminder that here's the website, and certainly we've hit the tip of the iceberg in terms of information that would be available to you. So I'd encourage you, if you want additional information, to go directly to the agrievolution.com website for additional data and information, whether it's about the virus or just the market in general.
Okay, thank you, Charlie and Ignacio. Lots of good information there. Does anybody have any particular questions? I don't see any in the chat box, but we're a small group, so if you want to open your mic and ask a question directly, then please go ahead.
I have one, Hugh, please.
Fire away, Owen.
Charlie and Ignacio, good to see you. And when I was in Spain, one of the things that really stood out to me was how the specialty market was dictating purchases, and how there was so much optimism around that based on people eating healthier. So do you still have some optimism for that? Because has COVID, I don't know if COVID has changed the way people eat. I think in some places it's changed how people drink, as in they're drinking more, but are they eating more healthy? And do you think that's going to translate into opportunities for manufacturers, for equipment manufacturers?
Charlie, do you want to answer or?
No, go ahead, Ignacio.
Okay. Hi, Owen. Good to see you again. Okay, so now the analysis that I'm making for this current situation is that for specialty crops, the producers are complaining about the current COVID situation because we have changed the way to consume these products. We usually have this, or the consumers for good wines, for good food, for good fruits, and so on, were more related to restaurants, were more related to tourists, and so on. And now with the COVID situation, that kind of consumption is nearly zero. So those producers are complaining that they are losing the market, and they are the ones which are cutting their investments in new equipment now. So though I'm really positive about the situation as regards to agriculture, and I would say that, okay, we are staying at home and we have changed our consumption patterns. Now we have had a couple of months where consumers at home have no choice to buy a mobile phone, a laptop, or whatever, and they were only allowed to get out of their homes, to go to the supermarket, to buy food. So I can tell you about my friends and relatives that they had told me, okay, now I can use part of my income to invest in better food. But though those consumers are increasing their share of income in those good agricultural products, this so-called luxury goods, the situation, as long as the restaurants and tourism and so on is not improving, is going to be really tough for them. So maybe we have to wait for some months in order to have actual figures for the imports and exports for wines, olive oil, and so on, to be able to give you a more appropriate and more accurate answer to your question. But now I can tell you that the situation for those specialty crops is not as good as it was last year.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry to hear that, because it sounded so positive last year.
Exactly, and we were really happy to have this part of the agriculture, and they continue working, and they have a lot of things to do. They have a really huge way to improve their productions, but we need to be cautious, and we need to wait till the situation is stabilized again. Or maybe if you don't mind, Marco Bezzini, if you want to add something to this from Italy, I will be pleased.
I would never contradict the president, that's for sure. But I think I do agree with your analysis, Ignacio. Obviously, I mean, the sector has been continuing producing, and specialty crops, obviously. We are connected with the very first sector, so connecting our life with food obviously implies the fact that people will always have to eat, unfortunately. The fact is that you're right. For some specialty crops, we will have to wait what the reaction of the market is, because wine, it's not a basic food. I mean, it's a luxury food, and olive oil is used not all over the world. I mean, especially in some countries, but not. So let's see what the next months will provide us. For sure, our sector is not being hit as other sectors in Europe, for some European countries. If you think about tourism, if you think about some side of the industries, I mean, we will continue producing. We will continue helping the farmers to improve their quality. We will continue in studying, for sure, all the new technologies, and we will continue trying to implement, for sure, what Agriculture 4.0 means in our sector.
Okay, thank all of you. Any other questions from those on the line? You also have Charlie's email. You can reach him directly if you need to do some follow-up for the information. Okay, good. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It's been nice to see a few familiar faces again. And like everybody, we hope to see you face to face sometime soon. So again, thank you. And we'll be in touch with another IFAJ webinar in the short future. Thank you, Charlie, Ignacio. We'll be in touch afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you
Hey,
very
everybody.
much.